And during the few moments that we have left, we want to have just an off-the-cuff chat between you and me, us. We want to talk right down to earth in a language that everybody here can easily understand.
So I'm listening to Tim Wise, and Tim Wise is a white guy who commentates on white privilege and race relations and sort of like what white people have to acknowledge about race. And he says a lot of great things, but I can't be his supporter because I have heard him talk on radio shows. He said some pretty white supremacist things. I'm sure by now you know the difference between white supremacy and being a white supremacist, or acquiescing to white supremacy versus being a white supremacist. Let me get that right. But he said something that made me want to make this video, and that was he was talking about he was talking about racial privilege and how whites view the world and how minorities view the world. And he was talking about how after 9/11, how our government wanted to go and invade Iraq. And he said that with astounding sort of like opposition, minorities like black, Hispanic, Indian, just non-whites were like, no, we don't think that's really a good idea. You might want to run the analysis on that before you execute that decision. But he said the white people had no problem going up there talking about we need to do something and this shall not stand and we'll liberate the people of Iraq from the terrorists and they'll love us and et cetera and so forth and whatnot. But all that aside, he said something, like since he was talking about race, he said something that really struck a chord with me, and it pretty much defines not just my existence, but the existence of other black men who I know personally. And he said that minorities have a love-hate relationship with the United States, this country. And there is literally no better way to put it, because it's a love because, we have I don't want to say we have the freedoms that we have, because other countries have the same freedoms the United States has. The only difference being is that we have a Bill of Rights and Constitution, lawful documents that expressly state that we have the right to protest the government and say what we want to say. We have the right to own guns. We have the right not to quarter soldiers. We have the right not to be searched and seized and asked for papers. We have, individual states' rights that the federal government cannot touch. We have express documents that say that. While other countries have those same freedoms, but at the drop of a hat, the president, prime minister, dictator, chancellor, whatever, can say, this is now, against the law, and they really can't fight against it. So that's what kind of makes America, quote unquote, great. And it's good living in a country that has that. Downside is we are not the beneficiaries of a lot of stuff that incorporates. Meaning, I'll use this example. I was hearing two people talk, again, black and white, and one person was arguing with the other person saying, how am I privileged for being white? And the black person responded with a straight face, if we both walked up to a police officer and yelled at them, who is more likely to get arrested? And it was that's one of those statements that's very divisive, because it's the minorities were like, boom, checkmate, point case, we're done talking here. And the whites were like, you still haven't proved any point. And it's like, that fact alone, that you can't see that, is very telling. And again, some of the whites got it. They were kind of like, okay, but we need more evidence. But it's that you don't see what you have because what you have is the standard that everything's based off of. And that seems to be the disconnect between a lot of racial talks and why whites don't understand. But all that aside, I want to go back to what I was saying before on how being a minority is a love-hate relationship in the United States, because it's like, okay, you live in the quote-unquote greatest nation on earth, but the police force comes after you more than it does everyone else. You are actively suppressed through systematic, I don't want to say, it's systematic oppression, but that's not the word I'm really looking for. It's standard operating procedure is inherently against you. And to go back to some of the stuff I was listening to by Tim Wise, he was talking about how, blacks are more likely to get pulled over by the cops for drugs, even though it's known that white people possess drugs and use harder drugs than all minorities, again, collectively. But that's also why there's a higher incarceration rate for blacks and Hispanics for drug use than there are whites, even though whites openly do it. And then he went into this whole, how everyone knows that, young white teenagers or just the white youth in general, you can even throw early 20s in there, how they will openly talk about celebrating 420, but black people won't go anywhere near those people because they know if anything goes down, they know who's going to jail and who's going just to rehab, and that's absolutely true. Now, myself, I don't smoke weed, but to act like that's not the case would be beyond dishonest. But that's just, another example of the, love-hate relationship. It's like, now wait a minute, we have all these freedoms and drugs are against the law. But then again, this group of people can openly talk about drug use and it's just they're just having a conversation. But then another group in the same country who supposedly have the same freedoms talks about it. Then we probably need to watch them. Everyone knows they're druggies, And again, we're talking about collective levels because, I know people always want to default to, well, I know so-and-so who's white and did drugs, or so-and-so who's white and stole, or so-and-so who's white and did this and got in trouble and went to jail. Again, we're talking about collective masses. So individual cases does not mean that the standard isn't there. And again, I go back to my, individual personal experience does not determine ultimate truth video. But that aside, it is truly a love-hate relationship. And for me personally, and again, I've seen this with other black males, and I've had these conversations. So it's not just me. So I'm not being hypocritical, because I know people love to call out supposed hypocrisy. I've experienced this with other black males. It's like we supposedly have all these freedoms, but the moment you're a minority and you try to engage in certain freedoms, you quickly realize how unequal stuff really is, or how, how you say, God, guns, and rock and roll does not apply for you. And, Aaron and I were having an honest conversation about race once, and I told him, I'm like, because he was asking why the black community reacted to certain things, and this has been a while since we've had this conversation. So I don't remember I don't remember the specific question that he asked, but I said, bro, blacks don't view themselves as a part of this American family per se. We're a part of the family, but we're in through marriage, and the family lets us know over and over and over again, you're here because you're married into the family. You're not here because you're a blood relative and we think that you deserve everything that we have. Like, no, it's not like that. Blacks view the American life as sort of a, again, I'll use my favorite example, the Titanic. You're on the Titanic, but you're in third class. Yes, you're on the biggest ship ever built. Yes, you're on the most luxurious liner ever built. Yes, literally the world's richest people are not even, 500 feet away from you at any given time. I know for free Titanic kids, I know you're like, oh, the ship was 800 feet long. They could be, you know what I mean? Stop being obtuse. But, you're still with the richest people in the world and you're on the greatest ship ever built, but you don't get the first class treatment. It's like you're third class or you're second class. Like there's parts of the boat that you can't go to. Now, if you're first class, you have free reign. I mean, you can go anywhere but the crew quarters or down in the boiler room. But nobody wants to be down there anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But when you're third class, you're a passenger too. You have your dining hall. And you can only go to the first class dining hall if you're invited in and if an exception's made and blah, 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 blah. Basically, you're not getting in unless you know somebody. And even then, you're still like, you were let in because someone let you in, not because, you're a fellow human being or anything else. But you get the point I'm trying to make. So, it is such a love-hate relationship because whenever I talk about traveling the world and going and I've even talked with my other white friends about living in a different country for a while, and it's usually the same thing. Like, why would you want to live in another country? It's like, this is the greatest country on earth, and everywhere else is a step down, and blah 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 blah. And again, after I took my trip to Canada, my eyes were open. I'm like, I don't think that's really the case. And again, and I'm not dogging the U.S. and I'm definitely not upholding Canada because Canada, they're not too far from the United States. So, regardless of my Canada video, I hear a lot of our issues, not just limited to racism, but issues have leaked into Canada since I've been there, apparently. But it's funny that I go to a different country and I'm treated better than I am when I'm in the supposed greatest country on earth, and that's again when the love-hate relationship comes in. And I had a guy who I went to high school with, who's he's not Hispanic, he's Portuguese, but not really. And what I mean Portuguese, not really, like his bloodline is Portuguese, but he was more or less raised in the United States for the better part of his life, but he has gone back and forth. And even he was posting on Facebook talking about, I can still have a gun in Portugal, and I can still do this in Portugal, I can still do that in Portugal. And again, like I've said earlier, you can still do a lot of the things in the United States you can do in other countries. It's just that we just have expressed documentation and laws that say our government cannot take these away from us. Now, I'm not going to go into the whole fact of, open carry and how that's hypocritical and how many protests I've been to or seen online where, you have your freedom of speech and you're in your zone, but you still get billy clubbed and pepper sprayed and maced and tear gassed and, just et cetera and so forth. So to sit here and say that, the United States has all these great laws, okay, but if the law holders are not upholding them, then are you really under the freedom you think you're under? Again, but I won't. That's a video for another time. But to be treated better in a different country than the one that's supposedly the greatest one on the planet really shows how minorities and whites do live on two different planes of existence. And I mean, I don't think it could. I think calling that sad is an understatement, but for lack of better words, that's beyond sad, and it is sad. But it is what it is, and Tim Wise did hit the nail on the head in this, saying that it is a love-hate relationship between minorities and the white majority. Now that probably won't always be the case. I don't know when it won't be the case, but that's the case it is right now. But anyway, that's pretty much all I can really say off the cuff on that. But anyway, love-hate relationship. Still like being here though. That's my video. John from the Gen XY.